We don't hear too much about fools anymore, do we? It was once a classic pejorative or put down, but you rarely hear it used any longer. We're probably more apt to call someone an idiot if we're being kind. Or something much worse that cannot be said in church if we're not being kind. There are no more court jesters either, are there? You know, professional fools. Still, from the ship of fools in Plato's Republic, to the Doobie Brothers singing "What a Fool Believes," to the Beatles, "Fool on a Hill," and of course, who can forget those wise words from that noted philosopher, Mr. T, "I pity the fool." It can be easy to think that, well, we are surrounded by fools. Present company excluded, of course. Fools play an important role in sacred scripture, too. The book of Proverbs, chapter 26 in particular, is full of fools. And our gospel today that we have just heard from St. Luke is known as the parable of the rich fool. And in it, a man with a bountiful harvest is shown to be isolated, obtuse, oblivious of both God and neighbor. He talks to himself, not God, and his soliloquy reveals a startling self-centeredness. Rather than consult those whose lives are intertwined with his, he asks himself, "What shall I do? I do not have space. I know I shall tear down, I shall store, I shall say to myself," do you notice a theme? It's all about him. My harvest, my barns, my grain, myself, my. The kicker, of course, is that the rich man's egocentric plan for stockpiling and spending for his own enjoyment is interrupted by a surprising appearance by God. Interestingly, it's the only such time that there's divine intervention in a gospel parable. This is the only time that God directly intervenes in one of these parables. "You fool," comes the accusation, with the notice that this very night his life will be demanded of him. The question, critical question then, is, all the things that you have prepared, to whom will they belong? The answer is clear. Everything belongs to God. Even life itself is given to us on loan. And in the end, the rich fool gains no benefit from all that he has acquired, all of his bounty. I find it amusing that the word fool comes from the Latin thallus, which means, are you ready for this? Windbag. There's another word you never hear anymore, windbag. The fool is a greedy windbag, talking to himself about all of his treasures, which in the end are simply vanity of vanities, as we heard in the first reading from Ecclesiastes. When death comes, and God makes it abundantly clear that it is coming for him and for us, all those vanities will be gone like a puff of smoke. Death is the beginning of the evening out process, which reveals earthly treasure for what it is in light of eternity. Again, as we heard Koheleth in Ecclesiastes say, what do mortals get from all the toil and strain which they toil under the sun? The answer, zip, nada, nothing. This teaching of Jesus, sisters and brothers, isn't meant to scare us into ridding ourselves of everything that we've ever acquired, but it should cause us to ask, what am I living for? Earthly goods are necessary to an extent, but they themselves offer nothing for our souls. Especially not when hoarded. Trust me, yesterday I braved the aisles of IKEA. What was I thinking? There are a zillion and one options for you to store up said earthly goods. But to think that the soul is satisfied when the body has abundant goods is simply, well, foolish. Rather, the use of our goods demands that we must have a proper orientation, namely generosity toward God and neighbor. It's only when we're rich in this manner that we can say to our souls, relax. All is in proper order. All is where it needs to be. We would do well to guard against thinking that greed is limited to wealth, as if this teaching of Jesus is just meant for those who have offshore foreign bank accounts. Far from it. It can take the form of the accumulation of anything that is unnecessary. Greed for power, for status. It's almost as common as greed for wealth. And that happens, by the way, as often in Houston as it does on the French Riviera. It happens just as much in our homes as it does in corporate boardrooms. We can also be greedy for things like social connections or experiences, the fear of missing out, FOMO. Or we can be miserly with our gifts and talents too, not sharing ourselves with others, not being good stewards. You know, it's the greed of self, thinking, well, I have nothing of value to offer. It's all foolishness. In every case, the thing desired or hoarded is a false version of true life itself. And so it is that Jesus urges his followers, don't make that mistake. God alone is the source and the purpose of life. Food, shelter, clothing, all that supports life. And a prudent reserve of our resources can ease our anxieties. I'll grant you that. But the basis of life and peace is not comfort, wealth, or box Swedish furniture, but the God alone who provides it, who makes it all possible. We are created to become like Christ, and true wealth consists of the everyday, day in, day out decisions that we make that enable us to better reflect Christ in our actions, words, and deeds. We are called to an intentional discipleship in following the Lord. And every act of forgiveness, generosity, of kindness that we make along that path is a building up of true treasure that will endure, last, and ultimately draw us closer to the purpose of life that God has and desires for us. And so in the end, sisters and brothers, I'm willing to bet that the happiest person that you know is also the most thankful person you know. Gratitude deepens life. It enriches us because it places all that we have not in storage, but in the context of proper relationship and orientation toward God's love, a love that will not abandon us. This is the way to live. This is the way to die. This is the way of Christ. Anything else are just the famous last words of a fool.